is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Great presentation, Brian. For those in the audience, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box. Brian, my first question is, what are the top three deep tech spaces you think hold the most promise in the current market?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So for us, I do think it's in the life sciences and the technology aspects of the life sciences. Innovation is going to be required in healthcare to control costs. As many of you know, our healthcare costs in the U.S. are 3.5 times any other developing country in the world. And the current modeling and payment systems that we all use in healthcare are broken. And so to gain entry in that, I think the earliest deep techs coming off university campus that have the most promise, I think, are in that area. Of course, some of that is informed with AI. The Precipio company that we mentioned here is our AI investment. In fact, out of the 31, we've put a $10 million bet on that particular company out of our funds here. But early stage life sciences, I think is going to be key. I think there's going to be significant deep tech advancements in robotics and automation of mechanical engineering and other services there. So we're very, very interested in that particular space. And as we start our new university relationship partners, we do kind of source out those two big things. And then third, I would say that any technologies or tech that is in the space of managing, monitoring, and reporting on energy usage and energy efficiency. I think the energy and the alternative energy space is going to be the third deepest space and location, certainly that we're looking at. And certainly we're seeing a lot of, interest in around the country.
Well, health tech is certainly a very big space. Where do you think AI and the technology will have its biggest gains? Where should it be going first?
Yeah. So my personal opinion is this. I've spent multiple decades in the healthcare space, primarily in hospital-based services, and our entire evolution of healthcare right now, it's based on payment for volume. So regardless of what happens in healthcare, what the outcome is, you pay for procedure, you pay for a visit, you pay for a prescription. And the evolution that's needed in healthcare is that we have to reduce the cost of healthcare and get it to where the correct things are being incentivized for payment. If you think about it, let's say that Hall was a surgeon, I was the anesthesiologist, we do a surgery, and you wind up with a complication of an infection and have to have 3 more surgeries. Well, the complication is that we had an infection that should have been prevented, but the incentive is, weirdly put in place that we're going to have 3 more surgeries and I'm going to get paid for 3 more surgeries on that particular situation. And so the biggest innovation, I think, is we have to move from volume to value. You have to be paid on value and outcome, which is a very tricky thing to do. In order to accomplish that goal, our belief and many thought leaders in the space is we must move the hospital to the home. What I mean by that is we have to use technology advantages to be able to monitor, manage, and maintain patients and their health in their home without requiring them to have to come to the doctor's office, come to the ambulatory surgery center, or come to the hospital or the emergency room. To do that, the biggest advancements, to your direct question, Hall, are going to be around artificial intelligence and the empowerment of remote patient monitoring, what we call RPM, in the home space to avert and create opportunities for intervention before crisis or the acuity of a medical condition is risen to the point where they do have to go to an emergency visit, or they do have to go to the hospital on a weekend and get admitted for 3 days for diuretics or whatever the particular thing is. So I think the number one movement is hospital to home and the empowerment of remote patient monitoring.
Great. We have a question from the audience, or actually from Ray on the panel. Clarification, does the company own the IP? Who has control over the board, and is the royalty perpetual? It's in the chat box.
Yeah, great questions. And so this comes down to our assignment model. So the company, i.e. the investors and the founders, that is a full assignment of the rights to the IP. It is an ownership transfer from the university to the startup company. So to that question, it's absolutely IP is controlled and maintained there. Now, to be a little bit more transparent on how that works, we do have clauses that, let's say I brought out 6-feet color, but after 5 years, there's been zero commercialization and there's been zero advancement of the technology. If there's failure to perform and go to market, then the university can have some clawback rights or get additional rights back on the university. But as long as we win and succeed with the advancement and the return of the royalty to the university, then we get to hold the IP and it stays in our power and control. The board is 100% chosen, selected, and seated by us as the investment firm in this particular case. We try to bring in, obviously, subject matter experts, finance and go-to-market strategists, and folks to do that. But we seat the board, and the university, by de facto modeling, does not get a seat. A lot of times they'll want to have somebody placed in there and do that. That just becomes a distraction and sometimes a roadblock to advancement on agenda and certainly speed. And then the royalty is not perpetual. The royalty continues all the way until change of control. So our job is to grow IP, monetize MVP, and then exit the company to the largest bidder who can pick up that wholly owned IP portfolio company, take the technology and the talent and the transfer and move it on. But at that exit, the university receives their 8% simulated phantom equity style return, and they're done. And they don't have any blocks. You don't want to decrease your market multiple by telling, the buyer, hey, you get to get rid of us, but you got to keep Baylor in your back pocket for 8% for the rest of your life. Nobody would go for that. And so we ended at the change of control moment.
Right. Next question is the university's 8% royalty terms fixed and non-diluted with follow-on investment? And I assume it's based on sales figures or time period?
The terms there are negotiable. And so sometimes we do have performance triggers, amount of revenue generated by a certain amount of time. I'll give you one instance. We had a term where if the 8% did not materialize a certain amount by a certain point, they can earn up to an additional 2 points on the royalty for lag of time. Think about IRR stretch out. If there was a lag of time until commercialization, they had a chance to trigger up and get up to 10. But those individual terms based on the technology are individually negotiated at each transfer.
And are the follow-on IP developed post-engagement and investment shared on specific terms between the university and Wave?
Can you repeat that one? I didn't see that one.
It's in the Q&A box, but it says, are the follow-on IP developed post-engagement and investment shared on specific terms between the university and Wave? So,
great point. Yeah. So typically there is a pre-existing legacy set of IP patents and things that are transferred and assigned to the new startup company. And from that point forward, all new IP or any new improvements, continuations, developments on that are owned solely by the company. The university does not get rights back to any of the newly developed IP that happens out of the process of building the company.
Great. And the last question is, are you looking at any biotech inventions coming out of Baylor or others right now?
At this point, we do not have any biotech direct university companies ready for what we call stage 5 or coming out of this particular case. All of our biotech engagements right now have been typically sourced, VC founder-led companies, but it's certainly one of the areas that has drawn the most attention, in particular at OSU and at Texas A&M. I believe one of those campuses will be one of our first biotech transfers, but those are not yet out and available for release.
Great. If you guys have any more questions, please put it in the chat box or Q&A. My next question is around alternative energy. Where do you think that's going these days? It's continuing to be with solar, wind, and geothermal, or is it going nuclear or some other way?
Yeah, so it's a really, really good question. Regardless of where you're at on the political spectrum and all of the other points, if you study the raw data, I think it's fairly evident that the alternatives as proposed, solar, wind, are not sufficient, especially with our current storage capacity, right? And the ability to harness and store those at great enough volumes in order to affect actual daytime delivery of energy. And so, with all of the different mandates that we heard over the last year and a half of, so many electric cars have to be sold and so many different changes have to be happening in different markets, we actually believe that the nuclear energy solution is actually going to be one of the most significant needed and pursued opportunities. We have some friends out at Abilene Christian University out in West Texas, happens to be my alma mater, where they have a new, I'm going to blank on the name of the company right now off the top of my head, but they have a new style of nuclear reactor that no longer requires water for the safety valve or the cool down emergency shutdown, but they have a new mixture of isotopic and what's the word I'm looking for? It's a certain type of salts that in the event that there's a nuclear leak or reaction, which is always the fear that keeps the general public from allowing nuclear to advance, there's the steam that goes off and the nuclear radiation up into the air and the contamination of all things. That's what we've experienced in Japan, at Chernobyl and all those types of things. With this approach, and they are being backed by the Energy Agency now, when there's a leak, there's a release of these salts. Those salts grab all the radiation. It literally falls onto the floor. You got to go in and sweep it all up, but then you immediately turn everything back on and there's no danger to the environment in that particular situation. And so they are building a 1 megawatt nuclear reactor literally on the old elementary school campus where my kids went to school. It's literally across the street from Abilene Christian University. It's like right in the middle of town. And they're building that right now in Abilene. And I believe nuclear will be the future. And I think many other countries are probably going to beat us to it because of political agenda and other things are going to hold us back here. But eventually, I do think nuclear is going to be the answer there.
Great. If anybody else has any questions, please post it now at this point. Brian, do you want to say a few words to wrap up? How best for people to get back in touch with you?
Yeah, 100%. Happy to converse with anybody that finds any of these things interesting. And I would say this, especially if you have any affinity or relationship with any of the other universities or other universities you think might be involved. One of the gentlemen that I met at dinner with Hall a month ago has a very strong relationship at Tulane, and they've been looking for an alternative. So that has led to us talking about some conversations with Tulane down in Louisiana. But very simply, my email is brian@waveventures.com. Feel free to reach out to me. Kat also has the materials that we've seen today. And so whatever the normal follow-up processes are, Hall and Kat might distribute some of this information. My cell phone's in there as well. And so anybody that would like to talk, feel free to discuss things in the future.
We did have one more question. Have you looked at using your model for private labs, SWRI, as well as universities?
The straight answer is no. Most of the time, private labs have, connectivity to either funding sponsors or collaboration partners out there. Not opposed to that at all. We found ourselves in this little niche here and have been very busy, trying to put all this together here. But if there's knowledge or interest of how this similar style approach could do that, happy to, co-labor on that with somebody that can help put that together with us.
Great. Well, great presentation and looking forward to seeing more. Is there another question here? Oh, we've done that. So yes, you'll be at the breakout rooms, I assume. And so
Yes,
if anybody in the audience would like to talk to Brian directly, he'll be in the breakout rooms here. We have a few presentations before we get there. With that, let's bring up our first presenter, FinTech. Chris, go ahead and launch your slides and kick off when you're ready. We'll have 3 of these. Each one gets 10 minutes to pitch, 5 minutes Q&A. Brian, welcome your thoughts on these as well as those in the audience.
All right, very good. I'm going to ask Ray to, there we go, kick off the slide deck, put it in full screen mode. I'll apologize. I'm at a conference right now in a conference room, so it may get kind of loud here, but I'll try to be efficient with your time. It is a technology SaaS-based FinTech company focused on collections and recovery, software for banks and credit unions, and dispute management and compliance for fraudulent transactions. We've been in business as FinTech for about 3 years. Prior to that, I've had 4 other companies that have done in the similar space in FinTech. So our goal here is, as you see on the screen, is $1 million convertible note to really expand our sales and marketing team. We've got a proven customer base already out there, proven products and process already in place, about 100 customers, and we're now wanting to expand our sales and marketing. And to that end, there's about 10,000 banks in the country, 9,500 banks and credit unions. Our sweet spot is kind of right in the center. So it's banks that are between 20 billion down to maybe like 100 million in assets. While we have $200 billion customers, we also have $100 million customers. And their primary driver for that obviously is the increase in fraud and the increase in regulatory and compliance issues in the last several years. So their technology, if they have any, in the banks is pretty outdated. A lot of the banks are even using spreadsheets, if you can believe that, for manual processing and tracking of your credit card dispute or your delinquent account, things like that. So Ray, go to the next slide. So we have today in the marketplace 3 products. The CRS is for collections and recovery. That's the annual, roughly the annual spend there. Obviously the $200 billion banks spend a lot more than a $100 million credit union. But that's the collection recovery starts with the process of pre-delinquency risk scoring all the way through to asset recovery and post-charge-off asset and revenue recovery. Dispute management is for our Fusion DMS. That product was created 3 years ago. We have about 30 customers, I think, signed up for that right now. And that tracks disputes from intake through to resolution and reporting and keeps the bank in compliance, but it also gives their end users a seamless experience to get their money back into their account quickly while the dispute is being investigated. And then Fusion LRS is our data conversion product, which was the companies that had previous to this in this industry did merger and acquisition data conversions. So, Red, you can go to the next slide, please. So, as I said, the total addressable market that we're really focused on is those 5,500 banks and credit unions, between 10 billion, 20 billion and less. So we feel like we can land and expand there pretty quickly with these funds because we already have proven products and a proven process. Next slide, Ray. My management team and myself have been together for the last 4 companies. Okay, I forgot one here. Yeah, we've been together for the last 3 companies, to say the least there. And Jason Alfano is our co-founder and CTO, has been with me for the last four companies as well. So we've all had successful exits along the way with different FinTech companies. So Ray, if you'll back up one slide, please. So this is kind of the NASCAR slide, if you will, of some of our customers there, our product mix that we have about 95 customers on the different products today. And then these companies on the right-hand side, those are the industry drivers for banking technology. And I've sold companies to some of these, and they still resell our software and services or refer our software and services today. So we have a really good working relationship with these industry companies. Okay, Ray? Again, the management team's been together. This is kind of a quick list of some of our previous exits there over the last several years, but they've all been in FinTech. They've all been in data access and integration, and which is what we're really doing here behind the scenes to make this product and this workflow automation successful.
I'm Ray Martin. I'm one of the founding investors in the company, and I'm going to just talk about some of the financial slides. I'm helping the company raise some money right now. So if you look, so we have some really good revenue growth. Since Chris and his management team have done 4 bootstrap companies before, they're very efficient users of capital. We raised a total of $3.2 million, $1 million of that from management, 2.2 from friends and family. The first 1.3 million went out to actually acquire the Fusion CRS platform, and then the rest of the money has been there for development. So pretty efficient to generate that kind of revenues with a relatively low amount of money. And, with the $1 million convertible note, we're going to hire some sales and marketing people because the application's out there and is successful. We don't need any more managers. We need some soldiers to come in and help us build this out. But it's a big addressable market, and we think we can go out there and get a lot of customers in the door pretty quickly. So it's pretty standard terms, $12 million valuation cap, 20% discount, post-money valuation, 3-year term, 7% interest, and $100,000 minimum investment. And as I said, most of the money goes towards, we have a little bit towards software development, but most of it's going to sales and marketing. If you invest $1 million and you look at 2026 revenues and there's an exit there, if it's 5 or 8 times, pretty good valuations there and pretty good IRRs. Most likely exits, there are 8 large software aggregators. 2 of them have already approached us, but we're not ready for them. Very easy to sell to them once you have $3 million in revenues. Private equity companies, core processors, those are some of the integration partners that Chris talked about. There's some competitors, someone's already approached us, and then there are adjacent software companies. But as most of you know, M&A in the software world, especially in FinTech, is very active, and we feel that the exit will probably be the least of the issues for us. We just really need to get to that $3 million revenue, 3 to 5 million, and then people really start looking at you. So just in summary, really strong revenue growth, started out at 342 in 2021 and hope to get to 3 million this year, got to 1.8 million last year, 94 customers, 5 to 7 year contracts. One thing that's really important is we bring automation to banks, and many of these smaller banks do not have very good technical proficiency. So we bring a really strong path to AI with our existing software applications, and we can talk more about that later. Chris has had 4 previous bank FinTechs, very focused addressable market, pretty large too. Management has cash invested, and we've got some really strong exit prospects. So that's it. We're ready for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, guys. Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, my first question is with the target of your market being, medium and let's call them medium and smaller banks, is your product specifically on credit card debit and credit card transactions, or does it also handle fraud and other management issues around ACH and transfers?
Great question. So it handles all types of fraud. It's basically a CRM for disputes, right?
Okay.
So if it's check fraud, we go down to the sheriff's department. We keep all the information from the check fraud. If it's a wire, ACH, all the paperwork, documentation, a debit card, credit card, any type of internal or any type of transactional fraud. So even ATM, there's even and all of these are governed by different reg requirements, and our system keeps all of those and alerts the end user to what their requirements are, if they're going to be out of compliance for posting or alerting or notifying the customers. Our system does all that automatically, but it also manages the alerts to let them know that.
Interesting. Okay. And then post-event reporting and trending, there's so many different ways that fraud is getting overdone, these days. I would guess as part of the product offering, trends, actuals, this is a trend at your location, and therefore education and provision of guidance back to the banks on how to shore up where some of the things are identified.
So yes and no. So we're starting with the dashboard show the trending, right? They show where the money's going, how much the bank has out, what types of fraud, what types of transactions. So we do all that kind of reporting to tell you. And then also from a financial reporting, when the money comes, when they reverse that post, right? Then we've got to monitor those accounts for 2 weeks to make sure there's no, again, compliance issues, to make sure there's no overdrafts, things like that. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially using the AI and what we're building into the future, to do the post-transaction education, right? I'd love to see us get into more of that, because there's a lot of check fraud that's coming, whether it's senior, elder abuse, senior type of transact frauds and things like that, that we can document up front, and we can build the business rules in. We do this for our collection recovery system, where we do predictive delinquency based on your transactional spend. I mean, it's not AI, right? But it is great transactional data that we get from the different systems. Input comes into ours. There's 21 different business rules set up, or more, based on what the bank or credit union wants to do. And we can, with a degree of accuracy, predict your delinquency or your delinquent rate. And by that, the system then assigns either an automated text or a letter going out to you, or depending on the type of account or the type of delinquency, it may assign a human in the queue to call you and kind of work a more expensive route towards that collection. So our goal is to identify it sooner and to get the delinquency in the door faster.
Great. So Chris, what % of the revenue is currently recurring, and what will it be in the future?
So right now we're moving towards, and Ray could probably answer that specifically, but we're moving towards the full SaaS model. When I bought the company, a lot of it was software-based maintenance and revenue. So probably 65-70% of our revenue today is full SaaS-based revenue. They're all 5 to 7. That's just 3-year contracts in there as well, but they're all long-term reoccurring contracts.
Yeah, there is some professional services contract for the implementation part. And that actually was a little bit outsized in 2024 because we landed a big customer, 200 billion. And so there was quite a bit of implementation and customization that happened. So we charged them for that. So we've got a little bit more professional services in there. But, we expect to, over time, the implementation, the pro serve will get down to about 10%, 10 to 15% of revenues, and everything else will be SaaS license-based revenues over time.
And that money's helped us grow and invest back into the company sooner, rather than having to wait on the full SaaS.
Right. And so my next question is about AI. How do you see it contributing to your productivity here in building it, as well as in the user selling it to the user itself? How's AI going to come in there?
So I'm actually at a conference right now with probably the 200 companies that run all of FinTech, right, in this country, and all the product. And it's really cool what we've focused on with AI. Some of the money in 2025 is actually going to be used to start building out our machine learning to the AI. And then the rest of the raise, if we do another one or in next year, would be used for full-blown AI. But the possibilities for data modeling, if we kind of extract out the fraud and the collections and just use some nondescript data for modeling purposes, and what you can do with that is just phenomenal. So I'm really excited about that.
The other co-founder is Jason Alfano, and he's the CTO. He's got a whole software development plan, and look, as exponential as AI is exploding, he's constantly interweaving how to change that software development plan to make the development process more efficient, as Chris said. And then, of course, as I said earlier, banks look to us, these smaller banks look to us for for automation. And one of the really neat things about this management team is they have, 25 years plus of understanding bank operations, bank software. They've delivered, software for companies before. They understand how banks work. And so we're the perfect people to kind of take the applications that we currently have, build AI agentic features on top of that kind of expand the features and the applications. And so we're working on all that. So this $1 million convert is really to help us really do kind of a jump up in sales and marketing. And then next year we're thinking, it's not in the numbers, but next year we're thinking of doing a Series A, raising kind of $3 million, and then really go after the AI opportunity.
Great. And my last question is, Chris, you've had many good exits there. What have you done in the past to achieve positive exits, and how are you running that game plan here?
We're selling Howard's telling me the same people we've always sold to, right? There's been 10,000 banks. They kind of roll up and buy and sell, but it's still the same people. We have a great name in the industry, I think. We have great products. We can at least get an audience with the same banks I sold to the last 2 or 3 times. If the product's not a fit, it's not a fit. But our co-marketers and our other companies that we sell products to, like the ones you saw on the screen earlier, we're going down the path of now reselling those. We've had 2 meetings this week while I'm at this conference with them reselling our software and services as well. So it's a very incestuous small business fintech and banking is. So everybody knows that if you do a good job or if you don't do a good job, our plan there is just to continue to serve community banks and credit unions and build good products and make some money doing it.
That's great. We're at the end of our time. I want to thank you both for a great presentation. Looking forward to seeing you guys in the breakout room here shortly. Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.